Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to an Anfield Index special. It's a bit of an Anfield Index special, but it's got a Bournemouth feel. And because it's got a Bournemouth feel, I'm delighted to be joined by Craig. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, Craig.
Of
Number one,
course.
how are you doing? And number two, we always like to give a good plug for another sort of fan channel or other channel. So the floor is yours, my mate.
Yep. Thank you so much for inviting me on, Dave. So I'm doing very well. Doing well. Albeit it's a bit of a struggle throughout the summer with no football. It's just like you know, I've got to spend the next 2-3 months with not being able to go to Dean Court. Yeah, the pre-season friendlies. We got the summer series. We got TST, which is kicking off later on, but yeah, it's not the same, is it? It's not the same
No.
at all, mate. But yeah, so I am the lead host of UTC IAD. So up the cherries in all departments. So I run that with my colleagues Matt, Ollie, and also Malcolm. So we've been very successful, and we've had loads of special guests on. The likes of Peter Hooton, of course,
Nice.
a massive Liverpool fan.
Yeah.
Even though Everton decided to steal that song, didn't they, for
Yeah.
the '95 FA Cup final? But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, loads of other special guests as well. So yeah, please do come and check us out.
Good stuff. And hopefully, people, by the end of this, Craig will still like us because we're here today to talk about a player, let's be honest, we
Mm,
are hoping to possibly move across to Anfield. So I'm sure you've all seen the rumours, the stories, various things, and they're even from this morning going out, aren't they? From Romano, Alex Crook as well, that Liverpool are edging closer potentially
yeah.
to signing Milos Kerkez in a deal that's reportedly around the £40 million mark. I mean, did want to ask you about it from a Bournemouth perspective, Craig,
Yeah.
because naturally there's excitement from our end on the Liverpool side, but I suppose is the feeling that it will happen in Bournemouth the same as well?
Milos has got a YouTube channel, and it's quite funny. His YouTube channel it seems to be a gaming thing. To be honest, not my cup of tea. But I was having a little watch of that, and he did say that he wasn't going to Liverpool on there at one point. Take it with a pinch of salt. I
Yeah.
think, at the end of the day, Liverpool Premier League champions, a side that, will be competing at the top table in Europe, and would be expected to be one of the contenders to win the Champions League next season. Um, he would be very silly not to make that move. You know, if I was a neutral, I'm not a neutral.
Yeah.
So I'm going to turn around and say that I want Milos to stay 100%. He is by far the best left back in the whole division. I know that Fulham fans have turned round and said that they've got the best left back. I can't see it. I
No.
can't see it. In all honesty, Milos is fantastic going forwards. He's great in defence. He reads the game so well. He is an all-round player. So, yeah, unfortunately, um, I can kind of see that it's going to be very difficult for us to keep hold of Milos.
It's an interesting one, and you're probably able to shed a bit of light on this because people look for concurrent moves, don't they? Like, oh,
Yes,
Bournemouth stopped him for his replacement, and I know you bought young Solar last season, and people thought, oh, could that
yes.
be with a future eye on this? But if I'm reading it right, Bournemouth are in the market for left backs at the moment, aren't they? As well, there's been a few bids or links coming through.
Yes, there has been. There's been a lot of speculation. My general rule of thumb is I don't get excited about it until Mark McAdam, who is a Cherries fan himself, he's been on the channel several times. Lovely guy. Until he actually comes out and says what's going on, because
Yeah,
he knows a lot more behind the scenes at this football club. Um, I would say this is still, it looks like it's progressing. Fabrizio Romano has turned around and said it. Of course, another very, very reliable source. But at the same time, I'm hoping, I'm hoping there is some way we can keep hold of Milos, but I very highly doubt it. Um, but yeah, it looks like it's progressing.
I mean, it's quite clear looking at the fan sites and from your content and different bits that Kerkez is massively popular with Bournemouth fans, and he's
Mhm.
only been there a short while though, into his second
Yes.
season. How would you almost, because he's such a young fullback, 21 as well, how would
Mhm.
you describe his time at Bournemouth so far?
Oh, he's been electric. He's been electric. Just going back onto Solar as well, because I know that you mentioned him, and
Yeah,
I forgot to actually touch on him. I spoke to Alejo Rivera, who is the Argentine Martin Tyler, if you imagine, or John Motson.
yeah,
He has been around the scene a long, long time, and he said Julio Solar is as good, if not better, than Milos Kerkez. Now, I don't believe he'll be better. However, if we've got 75% of the player that we have in Milos Kerkez, then we've still got a fantastic sign. And that shows, and why I
yeah,
would want to mention that there shows exactly what Milos Kerkez has done in a Cherries shirt. He come in, with a bit of pedigree from AZ Alkmaar. He did very, very well in the Eredivisie. Um, and he's never looked out of place in
nah,
the top flight. He's always very calm, collective. He is sometimes does make a rash challenge.
yeah,
There is some times when you think, oh well, that was a bit close. Um, he also likes to wind up Matthias Cunha quite a bit as well, as you saw in the cup game against Wolves. Of course, Matthias Cunha is going to the Plastic Manx, so
yeah.
yeah, he can probably wind him up a little bit more for Liverpool. But yeah, I think we are in the market for replacements. I believe we will have a look. We need really two players for every position, especially if we're going to start building towards a European place. The last thing we want to do is go into Europe eventually
Yeah.
with a side which is a little bit too stretched. But hopefully it answers your question that Milos Kerkez has been absolutely outstanding. He's popped up with a couple of goals, moving the ball forwards, his crosses into the box, the tackling, his leadership, his reading of the game. He is by far the best left back in the Premier League and probably one of the best in the world at this moment in time.
Wow, high praise indeed from someone that watches him every week. And you mentioned him in terms of and how well Bournemouth have done this
Yeah.
season, obviously, like really pushing even for right at the top of the league.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think of whether you think of the best moments for Kerkez. Because people remember that cross against Tottenham, don't they, which led to the goal. Has he
Yeah.
got a has he got a best moment for you particularly, or best collection of moments so far?
To be honest, it's very difficult to pick just one. That Tottenham game, yes, I completely agree. That was probably one of the shining moments from a lot of very shining moments.
Yeah,
It's hard to pick one that sticks out. The game at St James's Park, he was immense in that day. Very, very good. He hasn't really, in all honesty, he hasn't had a poor game for this football club. He
wow,
really hasn't. He really hasn't. He's that much of a decent, good professional that,
yeah,
he goes out there and gives a consistent performance week in, week out. Um, the game against Wolves as well. At Molineux, don't get me wrong, Wolves were poor. He did score a goal in that game as
yeah,
well. You know, again, Wolves were not getting through on that side of the pitch, so they were having to go down the opposite side. What you will tend to find, and what we tend to find, of course, Liverpool have got arguably a stronger team than we have, is that we find that player teams have to go down that right-hand side
Yeah.
because Milos has got it covered so well. When you've got the player in front of him as well, be that Dango Ouattara or Antoine Semenyo,
Yeah.
who's been absolutely brilliant. The creativity comes about. Marcus Tavernier can also be down that left-hand side. Semenyo normally plays on the right. So he will. There's a lot of overlapping runs as well that he'll make as well into the box. So yeah, there's a lot of positives. You probably think that I've just I've just thrown it out there, but the reason why I've just thrown as many superlatives at Milos Kerkez
Mm.
as I have is because he is that good. He will be by far one of, if not the best left back in the world at some point.
Which, if obviously it comes to us, I know you won't want to hear that. We don't mind hearing it at all in that
We'd
regard.
like to keep him, to be honest, Dave. We'd
Yeah.
like to keep him. I'm hoping this is all paper talk and Fabrizio's got it wrong. But yeah, he probably hasn't. He probably fact checks things quite heavily.
And I am intrigued because, as you said, like he's been such a key part at left back. There's been Huijsen next to him. Semenyo, we've seen in a number of games in front of him as well. So he connects so well with his teammates at the same
Yeah.
time. I know he's young, so he's only 21. Is there any areas of his game? Because it's great that he's got superlatives, but do you think there's areas of his game he needs to work on or develop at all to go even further?
The only one you could say is possibly his discipline.
Yeah.
He can be a little bit hot-headed. But do you know what? I like that in a player.
Yeah.
I like, football nowadays is going too far the other way.
Mm.
And you think, dare I say, it, Cristiano Ronaldo, great athlete, but when he's in a physical battle, he'll roll around on the floor for about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas Milos Kerkez is probably a bit of a throwback to the old days. He is tough. He's a battler. He gets stuck in. He's not afraid to get injured.
Mm.
He won't pull out of challenges. Sometimes that decision is a good decision. Sometimes that's a bad decision.
Yeah.
He's one of those. He's one of those. And Liverpool got a couple of those sort of players
True.
anyway, which
Yeah.
is good. Like Virgil van Dijk. Nobody likes coming up against Virgil van Dijk. In all honesty, Dave,
Right.
he's a bit of a it's a bit of a shithouse, to be perfectly honest, to come up against.
Fair.
But you like players like that,
In the
and
best
that is
way.
what makes
Yeah.
football. So yeah, personally, um, I can't say that there's any real negatives, but discipline, if we're looking at, when you've got somebody who's a little bit card happy, Milos could find himself in a bit of hot water.
Interesting. So we'll see if obviously what happens for him next season that comes to the fore. And it's great. I mean, obviously, if it happens, we love to hear the superlatives. If
Yeah,
I was to really sort of pin you down on Milos Kerkez's 3 best attributes,
yeah.
what would you tell me?
His pace, his reading of the game, his crossing, um, his tackling.
Yeah.
To be honest, that's number 4. So I'm gonna have to take one out. Oh. Let's take pace out. His tackling, But like there's times when we've been watching a game and you think, well, that player is quite clear. He's might have the beating here of Kerkez, and then Kerkez puts in such a great challenge,
Yeah.
and that's the sort of player he is. When you think that the opportunity to actually stop a player has gone,
Mm.
I can't think of how many teams have had that much luck down that right hand side or their right hand side, of course, our left hand side.
Yeah.
Um, I can't think of many teams that have had that much success down that side.
Yeah.
Um, Man City didn't have success down
No.
that side. Um, Arsenal didn't. To an extent, at Dean Court, okay, earlier in the season, you did us quite comfortably at Anfield. But, for example, when you come down to Dean Court, when we were on that really good run of form, to be honest, I don't think you had it all, very
Like,
easy down that
very tough
left-hand
game.
side or your
Yeah.
right hand. So yeah, honestly, I think what you would be getting in Kerkez is an absolutely outstanding player, and hopefully he's passed on his knowledge and his reading of the game to Sola, and hopefully it just doesn't go through. That's what I'm hoping. But hey, I Fabrizio's put it there. Um,
Yeah.
he hardly gets anything wrong. He probably fact checks with a number of people,
Mm.
and yeah, I think we might have seen the last of Kerkez in a Cherries shirt.
Yeah, there is a real split from the Cherries and the Liverpool fans in the chat panel as well at the same time. And I suppose
Yes.
that the last bit I wanted to sort of ask you about, because Liverpool fans looking from the outside,
Hmm.
we've seen obviously Kerkez's pace like a roadrunner up and down. He doesn't
Yeah.
get injured much, and that's great. But one thing that's been talked about is, does he have the defensive attributes to sort of go to
Yeah.
Champions League level and that type of ability? But actually, from what you're saying, Craig, watching him week in, week out, his defensive elements are really strong.
Um, it's a very, very good question. And it's a question that anybody would ask. Say for example, when we used to sign players from the championship,
Yeah,
it would be a case of, and we've seen it with a couple of players like Ben Brereton, Diaz, it just can't make the step up. There's many, many more, whereas the likes of Ollie Watkins can do. Um, Kerkez, and of course this isn't, this is Premier League to the Champions
yeah,
League level. This is something completely different. This is battling with the very, very finest players on the planet in what is the best tournament in the planet. I know that this Club World Cup thing's coming up, but you cannot tell me that a South American team are going to be as good as some of the teams that you
yeah,
face in that competition, like PSG, for example. You know, their European teams have got the pick. But I digress. Honestly, I think Kerkez is ready for that step. I think
wow,
he is ready for that step. I think he will really shine at that level. He did play a couple of games for AZ Alkmaar.
yeah,
I believe he even scored a goal against Lazio. I'm really casting my mind back to
mm,
before he signed for us. I'm sure he scored a goal for AZ Alkmaar against Lazio. That was in the Europa League, I believe. But don't quote me on that. You might have to
yeah,
just do some research on that afterwards. But he's ready for this. He's ready for this step up. I am pretty sure that if you come up against PSG next year, even though they've got some really talented youngsters, they've got a
yeah,
really, really good talented youngster on that right hand side, isn't it? Due, I think.
yeah,
I don't think he's going to like coming up against Milos Kerkez. Whereas, of course, the other night he kind of had a bit of a field day against Inter. So yeah, Kerkez is ready for this next step.
Which, if it happens, I know it won't be music to Cherries fans' ears, but will be to ours at the same time. And I suppose that the final question, it is right to ask a solely Bournemouth related question, because
Yeah,
Kerkez seems the latest one. We know Huijsen's now departed to Real Madrid, Zabiani linked with PSG, and there's a few others. Is
yeah.
there almost the price of success or the progress a little bit for Bournemouth at the moment? There's a lot of envious glances at your players, isn't there?
Yeah, this is the price of success. And I actually made a statement during the season. And that statement was, and to be honest, I think a couple of these players would have gone anyway.
Mm,
I said that, European football was always a dream. You know, back in -17, if somebody turned around and said, "Well, Bournemouth are going to be fighting for Europe in a couple of years' time,"
Yeah.
I would have gone, right, okay, I think we might need to get you checked out, to be perfectly honest. But you know, nowadays, and last season, it kind of become a necessity. It
Yeah.
kind of become a case of, right, we've got ourselves into such a good position, but look at this squad we've built. Look at this unbelievable squad we've got. Now, if we don't get European football, which was always a pipe dream years ago, these players are going to be ended up playing in Europe anyway for somebody else.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that might come to roost. I think that might come to roost. We might be torn to shreds. And I am already looking forwards to the September window and the closure of this, because I'm just hoping we don't lose too many.
Yeah, I can well imagine, because it has been a brilliant Bournemouth side this season. And I suppose that the final thing to ask from a Liverpool fan's perspective, I know you don't want to envisage this, Craig, but if Milos Kerkez does move to Anfield, if this does come to fruition, as all the rumours, to be fair, seem to be suggesting, just for one final almost quote, what type of left back are Liverpool getting?
They are getting an all-rounded left back. Somebody who's quick, somebody who reads the game well, somebody who'll tackle, somebody who knows what's going on around him, somebody who's with that great awareness, somebody who can pop up and score a goal, and somebody that's only going to get better. So Milos Kerkez, if he does go to Liverpool, you know, I wish him and Liverpool the very, very best. You know, I think he'll probably end up with a Premier League winners medal round his neck at the end of the season, and it's starting to look like you might end up dominating the top flight for years to come. So, yeah, I would wish him all the very best, but I just hope it doesn't happen. And I'm hoping that, you know, for some reason, Frano and Tiago Pinto can pull it out the bag
Yeah.
and actually keep him at Dean Court. But let's be honest, Anfield, Dean Court, AFC Bournemouth, you know, Liverpool, you know, of course, there's prestige, former, you know, current Premier League champions against a team that's, you know, probably a underdog that is punching above its weight. Although we are trying to change that. I think it's no brainer if it's going to happen.
Time will tell on this one, won't it, ladies and gents? We'll see if there's any developments, even if they come later in the day. All it leaves me to say, though, is Craig, for the time, the insight, and for answering all our questions, pal, it is massively appreciated.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And
Thank you so much.
good stuff. And ladies and gents, that was another special